This is a critique for Brandon, Kenneth, Cindy, and Desmond. Now, before I get started on the critique, I always like to do a brief introduction to how I approach critiques. In the first video critique of the term, I do video critiques, and I group students together in groups of 3 to 4 students. And the reason why I do this is I find that it really encourages a community atmosphere. It makes us feel a little bit more like we're all in a classroom together, where we overhear where a student might overhear what a teacher is saying to another student. And also I find that using your work as examples for other students is a really valuable teaching tool. So for instance, suppose Desmond has done something very successfully that Cindy is struggling with, or maybe Cindy has done something very successfully that Kenneth is struggling with. I can use your work as examples for one another and illustrate in clear terms what that specific goal of the project is. Now, something that I often do is group students together with a common theme, so that suppose several students are having the same issue, or several students have achieved something really successfully, I can talk about that single concept to a group of you at once. So for instance, for you guys, the 4 of you, all 4 of you have done a very good job on this project overall. You all just have some value and saturation issues to work out with your tone scales to various degrees. So that's what I'm going to be talking about as a common theme in this critique. Now, something else that you'll notice is that I often write notes on your artwork, and these notes are here for me so that I know what so that I remember what I want to cover in your critique and stay organized. But they're also here for you so that you can follow along with the critique and hear my voice, but then also see what I'm talking about. And what I recommend you do is you pause the video at some point to jot down those notes so that you have a written record of them. And I do want to note that I always write these notes. I copy these notes into the comments section of the grade book, so you do have a record of them there as well. And lastly, I just always want to emphasize my revision policy. I allow and welcome revisions to assignments. You're welcome to do as many revisions as you need to until you get that assignment down successfully. And I allow revisions until the end of the following week. So for instance, we're in week 1. I allow week 1 revisions until the end of week 2. So I really, you have up to a week to revise assignments. Well, I suppose in some cases under a week to revise assignments. So assignments for week 1, you have until the end of week 2. For week 2, you have until the end of week 3, and so on and so forth. So with that said, let me move on to the critique. Let's see here. The common theme I wanted to discuss was that I'll just start with you, Desmond. You've done a good job on the tints and shades scales. So you do have your tints correctly progressing to white. Your shades are correctly progressing to black. But you want to work on the saturation in the top 2 saturation scales. So here in the constant scale, you are working with a pure gray, but you want to be working with a pure gray here and here. So, and you can achieve a pure gray by bringing that S slider down to 0. Oops, wrong layer. And this is actually more of a white, so I'm going to bring the B slider down a bit. But you can see the difference here, how that's a gray, and instead of green here, you want to work with a gray. The value is correct on these two. You just want to, in that this color is darker in value than your green. This color is lighter in value than your green. But you do want to work on this value of the constant scale. So if I convert your file to grayscale, I can see very clearly that this gray is darker than this green. And the idea in this project is that you want to work with the same, an equal value gray. So, it would be something more along the lines of this than this. You might want to take a look at my video, just re-watch the video I posted in assignment 2 of this week, where I discuss how to find that gray of equal value to your hue. So, with this said, I want to move on to you, Cindy, because you had a very similar issue in yours, where your tints and shades are totally correct. And I know you were really struggling with this assignment. The hard work, I think, really paid off. You just want to work on the saturation of the top two scales. And actually, your value is correct. So if let's see here, your values are correct. If I convert this to grayscale, I see that this scale is correctly, going from a darker gray to a lighter gray. This one's going from a lighter gray to a darker gray, and there appears to be no shift here. So the value is correct. You just want to make sure that instead of being at 1, the S value here is 0. Instead of being at 3 here, you want to make sure the S value is at 0. And then, by the way, feel free to, I know that you go by Cindy and not Cynthia. Feel free to title your files Scott Cindy if you want, rather than Scott Cynthia. It's up to you. No big deal either way. Now, moving on to you, Ken, or I forget if you go by Ken or Kenneth. You can feel free to correct me. Like what was going on with Cindy, or I should say Desmond, your tints are great, your shades are great. You just want to work on that value and the saturation of your tones. So instead of being a dark purple here, you want to bring that S value down from 100% to 0%, and you can see the difference there. This, instead of being a light pink, you want to bring that S value down to 0, and now the value is not correct here. What you want to do is work with a gray of equal value to this. So, an easy way to figure this out is, again, rather than explain it here, I'm going to direct you back to that tutorial video in week 1 as assignment 2. So make sure to watch Illustrator video in week 1 assignment 2 as review for constant value gray. So that's basically all you need to work on. It should be a pretty simple fix. Now, lastly, I want to talk to you, Brandon. And you have very similar things going on in your design. But before I talk about the design itself, I want to talk about the file name. You'll notice I put your name here so that I remember that this is your file, because you didn't include your name in your file name. So you'll notice that I open up these files in Photoshop, and once I do this, your file is no longer attached to your name. So it's really hard for me to tell whose is whose unless you include your name in the file name, which is why it is so important that you follow this naming convention. Oops. I'll write that down here. Oh, last name underscore first name underscore week number assignment number followed by the file extension. So exactly as Kenneth has done, you'll see he filed his Laney Kenneth W1A3. It's so important that you follow this naming convention because it makes it very difficult for me to find whose is whose if you're not following this naming convention. So it's a minor thing, but actually a really important detail. Now, in terms of your actual design, like the others in this group, you've done a very good job on your tints and shades. You just want to work on your tones. So first of all, you want to make sure that the blends are consistent, right? So it looks to me like you blended your, let's see here. Looks to me like you blended this bottom scale to a white, and then all of a sudden you changed the color here to to gray. So if you want to, change the color here to gray, you're going to have to redo those blends. You want to make sure that this green is not a green, but is actually a dark gray. Oops, wrong layer. And then this, this one is correct except for the fact that the value is too dark. So if I convert this to grayscale, right, so this should really be something more along the lines of this, a very light gray. This is a little too dark. This one should be more along the lines of something like that kind of gray. So you want to work on the value and the saturation of your of your tones. So I hope this helps, and let me know if you have any questions.